All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Dave and Nick here. We're doing our 2022 preview and prediction for the Georgia Bulldogs. Looking at this coaching staff, Kirby Smart, he enters his seventh season with a 66-15 record. Todd Monken, he's back for his third year. In the defensive coordinator role, Dan Lanning departs. Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann, they'll anchor down that spot. The biggest headline of the offseason, though, for the Bulldogs is their first national championship since 1980 when they beat Alabama for all the marbles in Indianapolis. They also broke the record for most players selected in a single draft with 15. Looking at the offense, Stetson Bennett, he is back. His fourth season at Georgia. Terrific fourth quarter in the Natty against Alabama. Highly impressive stuff what he was able to do there. But across the entirety of the season, he got much better at diagnosing defenses, his decision-making. Everything seemed to get better with Stetson Bennett. That's what led to a 2,800-yard season with 29 touchdowns. He averaged about 204 per game. What are your thoughts on Stetson Bennett, who showcased tremendous progression last season?
First thing, it's very interesting. Kirby Smart has done such a terrific job with the Georgia Bulldogs. Some people in the preseason were saying that if they do not succeed this year, maybe he was on the hot seat comparing to Mark Richt, saying he was just Mark Richt 2.0. But winning the national championship with that defense has completely blown that conversation out of the water, and it's not necessary anymore. Kirby stuck with his guy. He stuck with Stetson Bennett. A lot of people wanted JT Daniels to play. JT Daniels is considered the more talented of the two, but Bennett gets in there. He controls it. He's a game manager. He gets the offense right where he wants it to be. He returns for another season. He definitely got better as the season progressed. 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Only good for about a 64% completion percentage. I like that they're sticking with him. I think this is a good decision from Georgia. He's very loved on campus. Like you said, the terrific fourth quarter led them to the national championship. I like sticking with him. I think he has a little bit more left in the tank. Definitely not the most talented quarterback in the world, but he does have the skills to possess to lead a team to a national championship. We saw it last year, and I think he has potential to lead this team again this year.
Yeah, the players absolutely love Denton. They also have Bach, Vandegrift, Gunnar Stockton, and Carson back on the roster. And I called Bennett last year an above-average game manager. He might need to carry the offense a little more this season, though. Todd Monken, again, he's still here. So these guys have plenty of continuity with each other. This offense might lack the same explosiveness. Kenny McIntosh will take over at running back. Good pass catcher. He can make plays on the outside. Hits holes in a hurry. I like what McIntosh does. Him and Kendall Milton will split time. Slightly bigger back at 220. He's the more muscular of the two. Does a lot of work as an inside runner. He's strong and physical. Also like Branson Robinson. He's a top 5 running back in the class of 2022. Big, thick back, 5'11", 220. Really fits this scheme. Should get a healthy workload, I'd say, this fall. 191 yards per game on the ground last season. That was only 7th in the conference. Well, they were only 7th in the conference in carries. They didn't run it that much, but when they did, they were the model of consistency on the ground. They almost slipped some runs there against Bama in the SEC title game. That was one game they weren't so great in, but the opportunities were certainly there. What are your thoughts on this backfield that replaces Zamir White and James Cook?
I think McIntosh is a solid back. He has limited experience. Didn't get a whole lot of carries last year. I like McIntosh, though. I think he is a veteran in the locker room. I think the players like him. He's going to be that leader on the ground. I think they can run the offense through him this year. I expect him to take a big step forward. 3 touchdowns last year from McIntosh, about 328 yards on the ground. I like his potential. I like his speed. I think he can step up a little bit. Milton, I'm not a little sold on. He also didn't get a whole lot of experience last year. Interested to see if they can kind of get a two-back system going there, if they're going to focus on McIntosh the entire way through.
Number 3 back is very interesting because I just mentioned Robinson. He's in a battle with Dejon Edwards for that role, so they're stacked at backfield. No worries there. Even if they're a little banged up, I think they got plenty of guys to make things work there. They don't lose much in the receiving core. Jermaine Burton's gone. He transfers to Alabama. George Pickens departs. He's drafted by the Steelers. They lack size at wide receiver. They're Ladd McConkey, Karis Jackson. They're both 6 foot and under 200 pounds. A.D. Mitchell, he's not as big from a frame standpoint, but he is 6'4", so they do have some height there. A variety of skills and some good production from this receiving core. Gilbert, 6'5", 248. They might move him to wide receiver. At least that's what I'm seeing on my depth chart. You look at Smith, Arian Smith, that is. He has elite speed. He had 3 catches for 102 yards and 2 scores last year, but he wasn't healthy one bit. There's a lot of ceiling there with him. How do you feel about this receiving core that I like because they get a lot of guys back? We'll get the tight end here in a minute. That makes things even more better for Georgia, but focuses mainly on guys playing out wide. How do you feel about it?
I'd like to see Gilbert potentially move to wide receiver, a guy that transferred, has some off-field issues at different schools in the past. He comes here. I think he has some potential if he maybe move to wide receiver. I think that's a solid fit. I think that this wide receiving core is good enough. I think Stetson Bennett will be able to get them the ball if they can make some plays for him. That definitely will help them out. They don't lose a whole lot, like you said. Jermaine Burton, losing him to Alabama definitely has to sting if you're a Georgia fan a little bit. He showed some serious potential last year with 19 yards per catch during his season and 5 touchdowns. I think they're going to be just fine in the wide receiving core. I think the offense will be right around where they were last year.
Marcus Rosmi, Jack Saint, and Dominic Blaylock, he comes back from an injury. So these guys have plenty of depth, plenty of experience. They do not lose much. Of course, this is not a receiving core that you're going to call one of the nation's best by any means, because from a talent standpoint, it just really isn't. But they have a lot of guys, I said, are versatile. They all do a little bit of everything very well. And I think that's big news for Stetson Bennett. Even better news, though, Brock Bowers. He's ridiculous. 6'4", 230, 58 receptions, 882 yards, and 13 touchdowns. His skill set makes no sense. To be that big and to run the way he does, catch the ball the way he can, to run routes. Brock Bowers is insane. He would have been probably a first-round draft pick for sure if he was eligible this past April. He has 2 more years left, thankfully for you, Jay fans. They're going to pair him up with Darnell Washington. Only 17 receptions in the first 2 years. His only career TD came against Alabama there in the SEC title game on a jump ball. I don't know why they don't do that more. I want to see him get more involved this year, 6'7", 265. Find ways to get him involved, whether that be third and fourth and short or in the goal line area, in the red zone. I want to see Washington get more involved, but more importantly, Bowers is insane.
Bowers, one of the best tight ends I've ever seen play. So talented. The size and the way that he's able to move on his feet just makes zero sense. He is so talented. They should be feeding the ball in every situation they can. In the SEC title game against Alabama and the national championship against Alabama, seems like every time they threw the ball to Bowers, he was able to make a play. And I was just sweating watching that game. Alabama just couldn't do anything against Brock Bowers. Really talented tight end. He is the future for this team. He's going to be catching the ball a whole lot this year. They got to run the offense through him a little bit. I love Brock Bowers, but I also think, like you said, Washington adds a bit of a different dynamic. That jump ball potential of him is serious, and he can make some plays this year.
They also added a high-ranked recruit, and Oscar Delp, so tight end is phenomenal. And Eric Gilbert, we don't know what they're going to do with him, but if he plays at tight end, then there you go. Very stacked group. Yeah, Bowers, though, in the month of September, this guy was putting up insane highlights. Just the way he was able to run down the sideline, even if it was against a UAB or a Vanderbilt, certainly caught your eye. He was so impressive early on, and he ended up being the top receiver in every category for the Bulldogs. Look at the offensive line. It remains largely intact, and that's why the running game might be even better this year. They lose 2 big movers on the left side, but they do have high-end 5-star Broderick Jones. He's going to take over a left tackle. Off-season, really going to be focused on adding strength, technique, and aggressiveness for Broderick, but big-time player. They're happy to have him. Amarius Mims, he's in a battle tackle spot. Cedric Van Pran, he's, right now the only penciled-in starter on the interior that's coming back. Tate Rutledge, he's out with injury. And then Erickson, he's a senior, but he's not a lock for that spot. What do you feel about this offensive line? They don't have, a lot of, they're not pumping out first rounders left and right, but they have guys that fit the scheme. They're very aggressive, and that's all they really need to make this offense thrive.
I like Van Pran, a younger guy with some serious experience. I like a guy like Xavier Truss as well. Maybe he slots in and gets potential to start this season. Maybe he steps up a little bit. Tate Rutledge being injured, maybe he gets back at some point in the season, but that's definitely a big blow for the offensive line. He's missing him for a little bit. I like this core. It's a solid core. They don't lose a whole lot. They bring some guys in that can step and make some plays. They should be right where they were last year, and that should help the running game out immensely.
This offense had tremendous balance and averaged almost 39 points per game last year. I think they will potentially get better, especially when you look at the schedule. I think this offense, there's no way they don't get better just because there's a lot of chemistry between these guys. The quarterback's been around a long time. The receivers have as well. I think they'll start to use some of these tight ends in a variety of different ways. So this offense, they should certainly get better after a national championship season. Looking at the Bulldogs defense, that was elite last season. 10.2 points per game allowed, well under 270 yards per game allowed. The last 3 years, they've ranked inside the top 2 in run defense. Wisconsin this past season was the only run defense better. Now, who's going to replace all this beef on the D-line, though? A little concerned with this unit is over the last 2 years, they only had 2 guys ranked inside the top 20 at the position. Now, they got 3 in this incoming class ranked inside the top 15, headlined by Michael Williams. So long-term, they're going to be fine. But short-term, I'm a little hesitant to jump on true freshmen, especially on defense, making a massive impact, especially here at a school like Georgia. What role will they play? How fast can they adjust? It remains to be seen. I do think Barry Alexander, though, being 6'3", 325, he might be a big impact freshman for them on the interior. But regardless of who gets the nod here, Jalen Carter, he's one of the best in the country. I think he is the best defensive tackle in college football. I thought at times last year he was better than guys like Jordan Davis, or Devontae Wyatt. I really thought he was that good. 8.5 tackles for loss. Very explosive, very nimble on his feet, powerful, moves very well. I absolutely love Jalen Carter.
It's certainly normal to expect a step back for this defense, considering just how historically good they were last year. But Jalen Carter is such a talented player. He slots in there perfectly. He's going to be able to lead this team as well. I like Nolan Smith as well, the senior. He has some serious experience. He has potential to be a solid player for this team. Didn't play a whole lot last year, but has some serious athleticism as well. This defense replacing so much. A lot of guys drafted in the first round, so much talent across the board, But Kirby Smart's defensive head coach. He knows what he's doing on defense. Former Nick Saban defensive coordinator. He's going to coach these guys up, and they're going to be able to just be humming as the season gets on. The defense will certainly get better as the season progresses. I think the talent from these recruits will be able to carry them.
Nazir Stackhouse, 6'3", 320, Zion Logue, 6'5", 295. And you also have Warren Brinson. This group is really up for grabs. Not even sure who will start where on the D-line, so that's the biggest group to watch. It's not really a concern one bit. Again, top 2 on defense each of the last 3 seasons. So these guys, regardless of who's there, they're going to be a crushing force against the run. Very interested to see what happens with that group. Looking in the middle of the defense, Robert Veal. He's essentially a veteran at this point. Had a tackle for loss in 5 of the last 6 games. He stepped up in Adam Anderson's departure. Should lead the team in sacks this year. Expect big things out of him. And it's crazy to make that assumption considering Nolan Smith is also back. He could do wonders for his draft stock because he has a phenomenal first step. He's a natural downhill pass rusher. Does most of his work from an athletic standpoint because he just doesn't have great power or length. We'll see if he can make improvements in that area. UGA has some short-term questions on defense, but edge rushing I think will be just fine.
Yeah, I like they're bringing back Beal, 6.5 sacks last year, 7.5 tackles for loss. And like you said, Smith can really boost his draft stock, 8 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, in addition to the 53 total tackles for him last year. I like the talent in Smith. Revamped, going to lead this linebacking core. He has a lot of potential. I expect to see him potentially knocking on the door of the first-round draft pick next year if he has a good season.
There's now some new faces in the middle of the defense at linebacker, but 2 5-stars, Ismail London. He's a great pursuit guy. Athletic ability and coverage is evident. Very excited for his potential. Like Xavier Sori, strong, but wasn't exactly a downhill tackler in high school. Could potentially be an off-ball linebacker, come off the edge of this season. But, one of the biggest things I teach here at Georgia is aggressiveness. These guys are as physical as they come. So if you're lacking in that category, they will help you out. Those 2 guys I'm really penciling in here at middle linebacker. No concerns one bit in this front 7. Obviously, they replace a lot of big-time talent, but I think they will be just fine here at Georgia. Looking at the Bulldogs secondary, Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, they kind of need some work to be done in the secondary. They didn't face many tough passing attacks last year, but Tennessee, they had a 200-yard wideout last year against Georgia. Bama twice had their number through the air. Communication was tough. Covering the middle of the field was an issue. It wasn't always bad, but in some of those games, they struggled. I mentioned against Alabama, I picked them to win the SEC title game because I thought when this D-line gets neutralized, the secondary is going to get exposed, and they got absolutely torched. Despite this defense being elite last year, I thought this was a big area of concern for Georgia. Keely Ringo, though, one of the rising top corners in college football. Good size at 205, great speed. Had some issues versus those top 2 offenses I just mentioned, but he also had his fair share of bright spots as well. He's really going to break out this year. Kamari Lassiter and Nyland Green, interested to see how those guys get involved. Dan Jackson at safety, he didn't do much in coverage, but he had 40 tackles. And, they lose a handful of guys like Amir Speed transfers out. Christopher Smith, though, another veteran safety. I like what he can bring to the table. What do you feel about the secondary?
Secondary wasn't the best last year, but Dan Jackson, Christopher Smith, I like the experience they have. Smith being a senior, Jackson being a junior. They both have some serious potential. Jackson, more of a tackle kind of guy, heavy hitter. Smith, definitely solid in coverage. I think they have some serious holes here. They got to make up this because the secondary was just poor Alabama. It definitely exposed it. Bryce Young had a field day against that secondary, and I expect him to do the same sort of thing if they potentially play each other again this year, because secondary just hasn't really improved enough for me. But I think Jackson has some potential to step up and maybe be a leader for this team if they need that.
Tyke Smith, he didn't only play 2 games last year. He was phenomenal in the slot in 2020 at West Virginia. It was unfortunate he was not healthy, but very excited to see what he can do this year. Certainly the potential is there. They also added guys like Jaheim Singletary, Malachi Starks. They got plenty of fresh talent, along with the aforementioned Nyland Green. So I think they'll be all right. I do want to see them make some strides, though, because last year I wasn't exactly thrilled. Darian Kendrick, another one of those departures. So Lewis Sign as well. So they have some guys that are departing. Depth, kind of took a hit, but I like the young guys they have overall. I think this defense will be just fine, especially here in the back end. What are your final thoughts on a unit that had, I think 4 to 5 or 6 guys drafted in the first round alone?
Such a talented unit last year, historically talented unit. It is natural to expect some regression from this team, but I think this will be a typical Georgia defense. They're going to be hard to play against. Teams are not going to score a whole lot of points on them. They're going to stop the run very successfully, and I expect them to do that this year.
Looking at the schedule preview and prediction, I think the Oregon game is going to be a clean sweep. I don't see the Ducks putting up much of a challenge there. 11-1 with a loss to South Carolina on the road. Look, this is a South Carolina team that beat expectations last year tremendously. They're above 5. Shane Beamer's doing wonders with the Gamecocks. They have a very talented defensive line. They're at home for this game. It's also week 3 early on in the year. And Spencer Rattler, this is a guy that you can have an opinion on him all you want, and I totally understand if it's a negative one, but this is a guy who's going to play with a ton of confidence this year, have a big-time chip on his shoulder, and regardless of what you feel about him, he's a talented ball player that is going to make an impact in every single game. 11-1, again, is the final verdict from me. How do you feel about the Bulldogs, who are going to be back in Atlanta for me?
I also agree with 11-1. South Carolina, they beat Georgia in 2019 in Athens. They definitely can beat them again this year. I love the talent on South Carolina. I think they have really sort of built themselves into a great team. I also look at the game on November 5th against Tennessee. I think they're very fortunate to be playing Tennessee at home. I think Tennessee this year has so much talent that they're going to catch some teams off guard. That could be another game that they could potentially drop. But I think 11-1 is right where this team fits. Losing to South Carolina makes a lot of sense to me, but of course I would not be totally shocked if they go 12-0. They will represent the East in the conference title game. I think that's a very easy thing to say. I think this team has so much talent across the board. They have to be East favorites, considering how some teams in the East are just not quite good enough. Tennessee, though, could potentially give them a run for their money on November 5th.
This is a pretty tough schedule, honestly. South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Those are the only real opponents I'm circling. In Tennessee last year, after that first drive, they went right downfield. The puzzle was figured out instantly by Smart and that defensive staff. They had nothing for him really the rest of the day. Cedric Tillman, of course, he did very well, but it really wasn't much of a contest after that. The offense was very puzzling. They play Florida and Jacksonville. Anything can happen there. Rivalry game that really has not been close for whoever the winner has been the last couple of years. So there's only 4 opponents I see they can lose to. I only see them losing to 1. Overall, Georgia, this is not a great schedule, but regardless of who they're playing, I think this is one of the nation's top teams. They have the second best odds to win the national championship, and I'll be looking forward to a rematch with Alabama in Atlanta. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Nick, as always, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.